it looks so daunting when you think about it, but you can overthink it. And you just can't overthink it. You just have to say, okay, this is my goal, and this is where I am, and baby steps to this. And you just get there. And just keep going for it.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Deaver, and I'm here for the Story Projects. And we are here today with Judy Patti. I do
Patti,
yeah. Judy lives in Wales with her husband, correct?
Yep.
And she was born in the city of Milwaukee. And she is still working at Dr. Scar's office in Waukesha.
Mm-hmm.
And well, thank you. Nice. So, what is the biggest pleasure that you've gotten from that?
Well, patients don't always appreciate it, but I know that for them it's a fabulous service, and it improves their health to have a healthy mouth. And if the world has finally come to learn what dentists and hygienists have known for many, many years, is that if you don't have a healthy mouth, you don't have a healthy body. Everything passes through your mouth and goes through your body. So if you have infections in your gums and bad teeth, and that's bad stuff going on in there, you can't possibly have a healthy body. So the whole rest of the world has finally come around to that. Heart doctors got onto it maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. They started having their heart patients who were going to have, like heart transplant patients or any kind of heart surgery, see their dentist, get their mouth in shape before they would do the surgeries, because they knew the outcome of the surgeries depended on that patient having a healthy mouth. I also have worked with a lot of patients who had the lymphomas or that sort of cancer things, where they actually will kill all of their cells and start them over. Those patients also have to have an immaculately healthy mouth before they will do that kind of work. So I have worked with several patients getting their mouth into good shape so they could have their surgery and their bone marrow transplants. So it's a lot of people don't know that, but I know that, and that's my satisfaction, is I know that the service I'm giving them, they'll say, oh, I hate being at the dentist.
Oh, yeah.
If you heard it once, you heard it a million times. And I'm like, yep, I know, I get it. But what I'm doing for you is trying to keep you be a healthy person. It's just a personal, internal reward. There's no big balloons and confetti. My son always said, Mom, you should have counted how many teeth you cleaned as you were working. And I'm like, And he said, then when you cleaned your millionth tooth, you could have one of those big celebrations. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But it's, it's one of those things. I don't think about it, but I just take great internal joy seeing these teeth clean and the mouth healthy. And so that's my reward. Plus, I work with a lot of just great people. So,
well, that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
my earring's falling out.
It did. But we'll just put it here, and then we won't have to worry about it.
So
do you preach to your grandchildren?
Oh, yeah. Well, they've been my patients. In fact, when my daughter moved away the first time, she said, oh, my gosh, somebody else is going to be in my mouth. No one else has ever been in my mouth. Not you, Mom. And I'm like, well, you'll just have to get used to it.
How many grandchildren?
2.
2? Do they live near, far?
Brandon and his wife Katie live in Delavan, and Brittany and Dee live in Pewaukee.
All right, so they're close.
So they're close, and yeah. So
great-grandchildren yet?
No greats. Not yet. So that's why I'm trying to keep it going, because I hope to live long enough to see a great someday. But we'll see, because I don't know that anybody's that anxious to start a family yet. They both, Brandon and Katie are married. They were married a year this year, and the other two for 2 years now. And they have just bought houses, so they're, just getting their life settled. So eventually, children will probably come, hopefully, but we'll see.
Now, does your daughter live near?
She lives in Eagle.
Eagle? Okay.
My son's in Illinois.
So,
And, so not, in fact, he lives probably within a mile of where we lived once upon a time when my husband was working in Illinois and we lived there.
Right.
Yeah. So.
How did you like living in Illinois?
It was fine. I was busy. The kids were little,
Were you a dental hygiene there?
I didn't work. I was pregnant, and I didn't work when we moved there. And we were there, I don't know, maybe 2 years, maybe a little less than that, not very long. And then we moved back to Wisconsin. I went back to work then. But my husband was kind of a corporate tramp, so we moved around a lot, and with this job. And then as the kids got older, then we started well, you just go. So he would travel and stay someplace for whatever period of time he had doing the job, and he would come home every other weekend or something like that. And if it was something interesting, like when he was in Washington, D.C., then we would, in the summer, we were able to go and visit him. And the kids could see Washington and the Smithsonian and all the, fun stuff. So it worked out.
So how'd you like being a single mom?
It was fine. I didn't even think about it, I know I had friends who was like, well, what do you do when the kids don't behave? And I'm like, well, they behave pretty good. I didn't have big issues with the kids. And I'm like, I just bawl them out, It's like, am I going to wait for him to come home on a weekend and say, okay, now, honey, he did this. And no, this is corporal punishment right now.
And you won't do that again.
Yeah. And, no, we didn't. I didn't have a lot of issues with the kids. They were pretty good kids. And like all kids. And I had a brother. We fought like cats and dogs when we were young. And we've gone periods of time when we haven't talked to each other in months and months. And when we do talk to each other, it's like no time has passed whatsoever. We're very close. We're only 18 months apart. And we had a lot of battles when we were kids until he got bigger than me and stronger than me.
Yep.
And we finally decided no more fisticuffs because I'm too weak and you're too strong. Kids do this, and they'll fight with each other and grumble at each other. And I'm like, the kids always laugh because they say that's what we do, he and I, grumble at each other. And I'm like, same thing. We're still here, almost 60 years now. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 60 years.
Yeah. Next April.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah.
So what a great advice to how do you keep a marriage for 60 years?
Well, you could keep your husband on the road.
Let's see. I have 30 in, so maybe I'll try that.
I always say just patience. Just be patient. You just can't take everything so seriously. And you have to be empathetic. I think I learned a lot of empathy when I was a child and I was so sickly. And the way my life went when I was little. And that you pick up that other people have bad days. And sometimes they don't act the way they would normally act or say what they would normally say or not say. Mm-hmm. And you have to let a lot of things just flow by and not pounce on it right away.
Yeah.
And it's like, yep, sometimes you even know yourself, you're feeling a little grumpy or rushed or whatever, and somebody says something to you and your response might be, and you're like, ooh, I wasn't very kind. Sorry, you said
take
it
that back.
a little harshly or whatever because of what was going on. And some people are just too quick to pounce on that. And I always say, just patience. Just have to be patient. Grit your teeth and just say, okay, and let it go. And think about the good.
So, and you think that comes from you were sick when you were a
I
child?
think some of it did because it just, I don't know, I think it somehow made me aware of other people's feelings and things because I know my mom and dad were so worried about me all the time. And it was one of the issues my brother, as he got older, had with my parents and what kind of separated them from each other for a bit is that I got all the attention and he didn't. And it was and I knew where he was coming. I could feel what he was feeling. But my parents were so worried about me living or dying that he got short shrift, I think, at times. And it impacted him for a long time in his life, which I feel sad for because I was part of the problem. Not by choice.
Right.
Not by choice, but it certainly, I was part of the problem. So as it ended up, I had rheumatic fever. I was in bed, flat on my back for 2 years. They wouldn't let me walk. They wouldn't let me do anything. And my mom actually racked up her back trying to carry me because I was heavy. I was older and not a little baby anymore. And she would shift me around because they would never let me walk because they were so worried about me having heart damage because it damages your heart so badly. Oh. And I had a cousin actually born on the same day as I. And my mother and his mother were in the same hospital, delivered Craig, and she delivered me. He also got rheumatic fever, and but they never kept him down, and I think he passed. He had open heart surgery a couple of times, and he passed at age like 36 or so. Oof. Because his heart was so badly damaged. But they didn't know why I had it. And they didn't have antibiotics like they have today. They had sulfa drugs. And so they gave you what they had, but it wasn't the proper thing. So, and as it turned out that my doctor was at his wit's end, and he just told my mom and dad, we've done everything we can do. I don't know, she's just getting worse. I don't know what else we can do. So, I don't know, it wasn't very long after that. And he called my mom and said, I've been thinking about Judy, and I think one more thing I'm going to try. And even though her tonsils don't look bad, how about we just take her to the hospital and take her tonsils out? He said, maybe it's got something to do with that. They don't, she doesn't have sore throats and infection and all that, but we're going to try that. And my mom and dad, they were up for anything. Yeah. And so that's what they did. And what was supposed to be, a half an hour operation ended up to be 2 hours because behind my tonsils, my whole throat and everything in the back was totally infected and had
oh my gosh,
lots of pus and infection, and so they had to clean that all out. And after they did, when he came out and he said to my mom, we think we got it. We know why. She's sick all the time. I was never healthy. And so I didn't participate in a lot of things with kids. I only had my brother at home and a lot of books to read, as I was a voracious reader. So I started getting better and better. And then I had to rebuild all my muscles.
So how old were you when this started?
I was, I was partly in school in first grade, but no second grade at all. And then I got back to school in third grade.
Oof.
And in the meantime, I had a teacher at home, and I did reading, a lot of reading. And back in the day, the library used to have the bookmobile that went around, and they would deliver, like, you could take a list and write down check off all the books you want, and they'd leave me like 12, 15 books every other week.
Wow.
And I would have them all read by the time they came, usually after the first week, and my mom kept saying, can we get more? Because she's got all these done like in a week. And so that kind of kept me going. But I did start to get healthier, finally, and I didn't get everything that blew past me. So, and I'm still here today. So, but the medicine was so different. I mean, they didn't have everything they have now. And then I was diagnosed with cancer when my daughter was 3 years old. We were contemplating another child, and went in and did my pap test. And when I picked up the phone, a week after, and it's my doctor, I knew his voice immediately. I knew right away, oh, this is not good. And he says, well, it was abnormal. We'll redo it. He said, we're not going to jump to any conclusions, and so forth and so on. Well, it stayed abnormal, and then they did a biopsy, and they discovered I had cancer. So I had to have a hysterectomy, and I was 28, I think.
Oof.
So that ended our family growth. I always used to say I'd take 6. I always thought 6 children would be a nice number, but 2 turned out to be fine. We had another daughter who died when she was 3 months old from, they don't know, her death certificate said an overwhelming virus. Wow. Because they couldn't figure out what it was. They did an autopsy and there was nothing. So there was no physical reason that she passed, but she stopped breathing, and the doctor said, well, that's sometimes just a virus, and it just hits them in the lungs, and they're gone.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Now, was she in the middle of the two?
She was in the middle. Yeah.
So.
And Bob was very proud of his little sister, Susan. So when I was pregnant the next time, it had to be a girl. He said he wanted a sister. I'm like, pressure. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, oh, well, and I'm trying to explain, honey, God gives you what he gives you. You don't have a choice. This is not something you can decide. And he says, well, it's going to be a girl. And when she was born, and the doctor kept saying, oh, it's a boy. I'm like, no, it can't be a boy. It's got to be a girl. And when she was finally out and in the delivery room, and he got to see the private parts, and he says, oh, Judy, you were right, it's a girl. And I said, thank God I can take it home, because my son only wants a sister. And he's still to this day very protective of his sister, and they get along very well, and they're really 2 great kids. So, but yeah, I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna have to borrow somebody else's child, because
for a little bit.
You'll be checking it out. It's not a girl. So I always got a kick out of Britzy, my granddaughter, when her brother was born. And she went to the hospital, and of course, whole different. Everybody's in one room, and the baby's in the room, and she climbed up on the edge of that bassinet, and she's unwrapping. They got them all swaddled, and she's got them all, and she's unwrapping everything. And everybody's like, what are you doing? And she says, I'm looking. And she had everything out, and then she touched each foot, and looked at all the toes and his hands, and she says, okay, he's okay. He's okay. He's good. She was going to see for herself, and I just thought, wow, that is our girl. Because Tom had his open heart surgery when she was 5.
Oh, wow.
And she was distraught that she couldn't come to the hospital to see him because they didn't allow kids in then.
Oh.
And so my daughter called the nurse and talked to him and said, well, his granddaughter, who he's bonded with, is not sleeping. She's distraught. She needs to see him. She wants to know he's alive and he's okay. Mm-hmm. And my daughter, who was a heart nurse, said, so she explained to her everything that he'd have on him, the tubes and the stuff coming out here and the bottles and hanging and all that. And they said, okay. So she brought her in. She goes right up to him and she's checking everything, just like under the bed. She's looking, yeah, okay, that's there, and then she's like, okay, Papa. It was good.
It was good.
She checked it out. It was good. It was just like Mom said, and he was alive, and
I could trust Mom.
Yeah, and she believed finally that he was definitely okay, and he'd be back, carrying her around and taking her on sales calls or whatever, because he was doing real estate then.
Oh.
So he just would take her with him. If somebody called and wanted to see a house, he would just take her along.
Yeah.
And so they were together all the time. I had, in spite of my sicknesses and stuff, I had a really nice childhood, I think, looking back on it. My grandma and grandpa took care of us when my mom and dad were working when we were little. And we had a lake place in Golden Lake. And we spent the summers all summer at the lake and swimming and just being outside and having a good time and catching turtles and fish and frogs and, all the fun stuff that you can get to do. And
is that where you hung out with your cousin?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. My cousins were there a lot. We spent a lot of time together. And we'd be swimming out on the raft, and we'd go out at night and swim in the lake, in the dark. And the garfish would come in, or the big snapping turtles. Because sometimes, you were swimming and you'd hit them, because then they come in at night to feed.
Okay.
And they, the big snappers, they can get to be pretty big. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. Tin can telephones to the neighbor's house.
So it works.
Yeah, it does work. We had a lot of fun in trying to figure out how we were going to get it from second story to second story.
Okay.
But I don't remember exactly how, but we did it. We did it. I think the guys were throwing the cans with and it would fail, and then we'd have to pull it all in, and then we'd have to go again, and finally we got it to house. It was good, though.
You wonder how many of your parents just ignored all that racket?
Oh, I think they did. Yeah. They just said, it's the kids. They're just having fun. They didn't worry about it. So, yeah. So, but it was, I don't know, it was simpler times. And we roamed around our neighborhood. You could go, we had to stay on our block, but Mom wanted to know we were in the vicinity. Don't go too far. But we were pretty free to go. You could walk and you could go anywhere, and you didn't have to worry that something might happen to your child. So we were pretty free and easy to do that. And it's kind of a shame that kids don't have that kind of freedom today.
Did your kids?
More than they have now. I mean, I let them go. I tried to keep them within a range where I knew where they were. And if they were deciding to go somewhere else, they had to let me know. And but I tried to give them freedom to explore and be not always, under somebody's vision all the time.
Yeah.
So they could experiment and have a little fun and be little nixnutzes once in a while. And, you have to do that. It's part of growing and learning. We started in Milwaukee. We went to Illinois. We came back to Milwaukee. Then we built a house on the Root River, which got flooded out when the big Root River flood happened back in the 90s. And our basement got washed out of our house. We were lucky that our son survived that because the whole backyard fell in when our whole basement went in and the house just shifted off the foundation.
Oh, wow.
And the flood water was lapping at the front door. And I grabbed Tiffany out of her bed. I had her under one arm and our little poodle under the other. And I went out the front door and just jumped into the water and let what was rushing water carry me down, just yelling, help, help, till neighbors down the way came out and grabbed us and hauled us in. And I said, our house is gone, our basement is gone. And so we sat in their house, and they had a sunken living room with white carpeting. And we sat there, and the water just kept coming up, and pretty soon through the vents, the water just kept pouring in to this, over all this white carpeting. And we were sitting there, and we're, well, let's go up to the next step and see how high this is going to get till somebody comes to rescue us. Eventually, the fire department came with boats, and they started hauling people out. But
and Brandon was with you?
Tom was home at that time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to travel from there, and he was working. George Meyer Manufacturing. He was installing a manufacturing system there.
So he was at work.
It was a weekend, actually. It was Easter weekend.
Oh, Easter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we had to stay there. We took the kids to Grandma and Grandpa's house. My mom and Dad kept the kids, and we went back to the house because as soon as the floodwaters recede, you get looters. So, and our house was wide open because it was wide open. And so we stayed there, and we had a little bitty generator, which was enough to make a pot of coffee on, and one light bulb we could have going. So we just stayed in the house and in the neighborhood to protect your property. Yeah.
And then insurance rebuilt. You rebuilt it, or
we did rebuild it. We had formed the Root River Action Committee. Tom said we have to do something because they're going to flood us out. They were putting in the Root River a lot of this cement to make the flow better. And they were doing a pipeline, and they were putting all the sludge into the river, and they filled it up. And then they built a new bridge across Forest Home Avenue, and they made it really low. So it impeded the water flow, and it backed all the water up, and it was man-made cause. And we had been watching this for a number of years and said, this is a problem and nobody is listening to us. My husband he was the horror of Greenfield. The mayor would be shaking whenever they'd see him because he would go to every meeting and bring this up and say, hey, you guys are ruining, you are going to flood us out. Every time it rains, the water gets higher. It goes further over the road. And if we have a big rain, we are going to get flooded out. this is a disaster in the making by you people. And they just wouldn't listen to us. So he said he rented the auditorium at the high school in Hales Corners for $25. And we went and we put little notices in every mailbox. I would pile the kids in the car and I'd say, okay, we're going up. We're delivering. So we would deliver into every box. And we had, we had a huge turnout because people were listening. They knew. They had seen it. Mm-hmm. And we raised $5,000 that night. And we hired attorneys. We went to the state and we filed a lawsuit against the pipeline company that was dredging and putting all the silt in the river, and the county and the city of Greenfield. And we had the Attorney General and a huge part of his staff in our house. I made a huge pot of soup, had it on the stove. My kids were in charge. I was working, and I said, those attorneys are going to be there like 3:30 in the afternoon. They were coming to take statements from all the neighbors, people. They wanted statements. So we used our house as the place to come and give the statements. And people just lined up out the door. The attorneys were inside at my dining room table, my kitchen table, in the family room, each taking statements and having people sign. And we fed them and gave them coffee and kept them going. And I don't know, I think they did that they left like 10 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And because the line was, out and down, people just came to do it because it was like, yes. And we were petitioning to also get flood insurance. Oh. Your city has to apply for it from the federal government. It's not something you can just buy.
Wow.
You have to be declared a flood area. And your city has to apply for it to get it. We had gotten flood insurance 1 week before this flood.
Wow.
There had been a lot of snow. It got real warm. The snow all melted. It poured rain. And the water just kept coming. Mm-hmm. And we were at the bottom of a huge hill. And when our house was built, it was reinforced on the front wall because of the river across the street. There was no reinforcement in the back wall, and the water was coming down that hill. And the pressure of that water, we were in the basement, my neighbor and I, and they were helping me bring things out of the basement. And we were down there, and all of a sudden I said, hey, look. And between the blocks in the basement, all the mortar was just shooting through, and water was coming through like little fountains. And I said, you know what? We got to get out of here. Because I said, all that mortar's going, those blocks are going to go. And he and I ran to the top of the steps, and our door to the outside was right there. And Tom was on that stoop with Bob. They were trying to set up a pump. A little sump pump to pump water out of the basement.
Okay.
And Bob was off the stoop next to it, and all of a sudden there was this huge roar when the whole thing just caved in, and all the dirt and everything from the hill, everything from the back just kept sliding to our house and shoved everything in. And there was a big lurch, and the floor went down, and Bob was standing there, and Tom reached his hand out, and he just grabbed Bob by the arm and yanked him up onto the stoop and came in. I says, we got to get out of here. This house is gone. This house is going. I thought the whole thing was going to go away.
Yeah.
And So that's when I went and grabbed my daughter out of a nice warm bed into ice cold water.
She
And
loved you.
and she went, "Huh?" And we ended up at the neighbors, but yeah, oh, it was just a harrowing night, absolutely harrowing. And then we became the water station. They ended up supplying, because then all of our wells were contaminated.
Yeah.
So we had to have bottled water. So our whole garage was filled with all these 5-gallon jugs of water. I learned how to sling those things around really good. And I would deliver them to the older people. Other people would come and get them. And but anyway, the lawsuit went on, and we ended up getting, Tom took a job in New York and New Jersey, and he had an office in New York and an office in New Jersey, and we ended up moving there, and they won the lawsuit the next year. And so the people who were still there got some compensations, because the flood insurance doesn't cover everything, but it's better than nothing at all.
You brought notice to it.
We had a lot of loss carry forwards on our taxes for the years after that, because you just lose everything. So, but it was our venture into government, I guess. And I was like, how did you ever decide to do this? I don't know. I said, we did everything. We were like, no, that's not right. We're going to take care of it. We're going to do something about it. I said, that's just the way we were. And we were young and too dumb to know any different. And just thought we could do it, right? You can do it.
Do it.
And I always tell the girls at work, I'm like, look, you can do it. Just put your mind to it and say, you're going to do it. Like the ones who, well, I should have gone to school, or I should have got this, or I should have. Nothing stopping you. Nothing. Just do it. Just go ahead and do it. Make your plan. I've gotten several of the girls through college and pushed them the whole way. And they're like, yeah, you were right.
You're the cheerleader.
Yeah, because I don't know, some families aren't like that, but my parents were always pretty, my father was pretty laid back and very cautious guy. He didn't do things on the fly at all, but he was encouraging.
Okay.
And if I had something that I wanted to do or thought I could do or something, he was encouraging. So I always felt you need to encourage people to do it, because it's so easy to hold back. And I think not everybody has somebody to kind of push them along. They don't have, some of these gals just didn't have parents who were backing them up and pushing them and saying, yes, you can do this. It doesn't matter that you already have a child. I already had a child. I was in college.
Right.
I graduated. My son was at my graduation.
Yes, because you went through college, what, 3 times, 2 times?
Yeah.
For like 2 or 3
Twice.
different degrees?
Yeah. So, it looks so daunting when you think about it, but you can overthink it. And you just can't overthink it. You just have to say, okay, this is my goal, and this is where I am, and baby steps to this. And you just get there. And just keep going for it.
Best advice.
And Tom pretty much is the same. We were both A people, and so we just plunged into things. I mean, when they would move us around and we'd have to find a house, and we bought one that was just a wreck when we moved to New Jersey, because housing prices were so high compared to the Midwest. The East Coast was like crazy, and I'm like, this woman kept showing me houses that were way out of our pocketbook. I'm like, no. And then I'm like, this is our price range. So, and then she'd show, and then she'd be apologizing for taking me to this house that was, half a wreck. And I'm like, yeah, well, if it's a good basic house, it can be fixed. And which is exactly what we did. We found a wonderful basic house. It's hard to find a house with a basement. This had a half basement, and Tom had an extensive workshop, so we needed some basement space, and we bought this house. And I mean, I walked through it, and I'm like, okay, room sizes are good, layout's pretty good. And I didn't see the black and white striped wallpaper on the wall and the fringe red ball fringe all running around them. I'm like, oh, that's gone. That's just gone. That isn't going to be there forever. So, and we moved in, and I just started gutting it, essentially. I mean, so the woodwork needed redoing. And I stripped all the woodwork and redid all the woodwork, and I sledgehammered a bar and a wall out in the family room, and we just said, well, yeah, we could do this, And we didn't have the internet. Oh, you didn't have YouTube. I'm like, now, oh my gosh.
You'd be dangerous.
Oh boy. I'm like, now there's nothing you can't find out.
No, that's
And
so true.
we would go to the library and get a book, right? Now you just can look on your TV. So anyway,
Wow.
we just got into it, and the bathroom needed, it was pink tile, and they were half off and half, it was the house was well-used house. They had raised, I don't know, like 8 children in this house.
Oh my goodness.
And it needed a lot of loving care, and it had some wrought iron railing because it was a tri-level, and I took that, unscrewed that, took that out in the yard, and took all the paint off of it, repainted it. The neighbors, I'm sure, said, what the heck are those people from Wisconsin doing? I always had piles of stuff at the curb for the garbage bin. And I had great fun redoing that house. So it was kind of cathartic. And I worked at two different dental offices. One of them was 5 guys. They all taught at Fairleigh Dickinson Dental School. And the other one was with Dr. Sandler in Cedar Grove. And he was a single dentist. He had 5 children. And he was Jewish. His wife was Christian. And they raised their kids both. And he was just a fabulous man. He passed away about 3 years ago now. But we kept in touch the whole time since I left there. I just loved him. He was just the most wonderful guy, and he never had a hygienist, and he had a hard time. His assistant always said, well, he's just a little hard to get along with, and he had like 21 different people at the front desk in the span of like 18 months or something like that. They would only last like a month, and he'd fire them or they'd quit. So when I started working for him, I started at the front desk because I was waiting for to take my exam. I had to take my board exam. And but I thought, well, if I get my foot in the door, then once I get my exam, and he said, that's perfect. You pass, you be my hygienist. But in the meantime, work at my front desk. So I started there. Well, with having this turmoil at the front desk, everything was a disaster. His recall, his payment schedules, and that was when dentists used to do their own time payment stuff. And
oh my goodness.
You'd have your little card and people would pay, and nobody had paid, and it was just unbelievable. So I just kind of like, okay, I'll start at one end and just work my way through this office. So I started getting it all organized. I started checking on the people who were supposed to be paying. And the ones that weren't, I'd write them a nice little polite note first. And then the next time was a call. And so I started getting money. People started then because they were getting bugs. So now they're going to start paying. And one day he came up to me. He said, Judy, how are you getting all this money? Well, I've never been so rich.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, Because all these people that owed you money and were supposed to be paying, none of them have been paying, and I'm collecting now. And he's like, oh.
So it's a good dentist,
Yeah,
not so much in the front.
Yeah, right. He didn't, they're not businessmen, they're dentists.
Right.
So anyway, so I got it on track, and I ended up hiring my replacement. I passed, I became his hygienist, and so we just hit it off, and it was a very nice time, and the other guys were great, and they got me teaching.
Oh, wow.
I taught continuing education for dentists and hygienists because they were at Fairleigh, and they're like, Judy, how would you like a job? Passaic County Dental Society. We'll get them to hire you, and you do this continuing education stuff. So I got teaching, and that was fun.
See, you did use that degree.
I did. I used the degree. It didn't go to waste. I was really lucky in my career being associated with really, really good dentists. And they were not only good dentists, they were great people. They were just good people. So,
I think you attract what you are.
Well, I don't know. But I have had a wonderful career life. A wonderful life, period. I got great kids, grandchildren. My granddaughter is just a little bubble of fun. She's just so sweet. Always has been. And our grandson is a tall man of few words. He doesn't say a lot. He never talks a lot. He just observes. He is a sheriff in Walworth County.
Okay.
And when he graduated from Eau Claire, when he was at Eau Claire, and he went into the police force there, the chief said to us, his whole family, we all went there to see him in, and he said, he came over by me, and he just stood next to me, and he said, your grandson is like the perfect cop. He is the perfect cop because he's calm, he's quiet, you can't ruffle him, and he's just got that very good demeanor. And he says, yeah, and he says, just what a cop has to have. They can't react. They can't react. They have to be calm. They have to be steady. And he says he is just like a rock. He is steady as a rock. He's just calm and perfect.
Wow.
And they were really thrilled to hire him. When he went to Walworth, and we went for his swearing in there, and the sergeant there said the same thing. He said to Tom and I, we were standing next to him, and he says, oh yeah, Brandon is just the perfect demeanor for police work.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just his nature. I figured it was going to be a pretty ordinary life. I mean, I met Tom. I had my little pitter-patter when I met him, and I thought, he might be the one. But I wasn't giving in to that right away. I was young. Because of my illnesses when I was sick, when I was little, I skipped grades because I got way ahead with the home schooling and whatnot.
Okay.
So they wanted to move me 2 ahead, and my mom said no. So I graduated, and I was in the January 59, the last graduating class in January in the Milwaukee Public School System.
Oh, wow.
And I had just turned 17.
Oof, you were young.
And I wanted to take some time off and work, and my dad wasn't having it. No, because he was afraid that if I went to work, I wouldn't go to school. And I don't think that would have been true, but he thought that was the kind of, keep your kid going to school, because if they don't continue on, they won't finish. Mm-hmm. And so he and my mom hauled me down to UWM. I remember that trip down there, and I'm like, and they take you into the guidance office, right? And they, well, what would you like to do, with your life? And I'm like, I don't know.
I'm 17.
I'm like, I in the back of I always thought something medical. And I had talked about being a nurse, and my doctor said, no, you don't want to be a nurse. He said they treat nurses terrible. They don't get paid. They don't get credit. It's not a good job, Judy. Do not be a nurse.
All right.
Dr. Cutting always said that. And I'm like, okay. And see, my mother would say, see? So I had thought about a med tech. And when I was a kid, med techs did the whole gamut of things. You would take the blood, you would test, you would do all the tests. Well, everything got so much more compartmentalized as time went on, and they got smarter and whatever with all this stuff. And so they were just, ended up to be like a phlebotomist, and you never did any of the actual blood testing. That went to some techno person, and they were the ones who checked the urine specimens all day, or or blood for this. It was very compartmentalized, and it was like, no, I don't want to just sit in one little cubicle and do that all day. I want people. I want to be with people. So I was torn, and all my cousins and everybody is being teachers, right? Mm-hmm. So my mom said, you would be a good teacher. Just be a teacher. So I went into lower elementary education. And it was fine. And Tom went to UWM too. We dated each other. We also dated other people. I didn't want to go exclusive, and I don't think he did either. But he pursued me. I pursued him. We kind of took turns. And eventually, we just were like, yeah, I had dated a whole bunch of... and I'd try another one. I'm like, no, it's not quite the same. Not quite the same. And I think he maybe had the same experience, so we ended up, okay, we're together. And that was the end of that. But so we went together a long time before we got engaged and got married. So it was simpler times, though, much simpler. And I stood up in 5 weddings, all my friends. I was a bridesmaid for everybody. And he was a groomsman quite a number of times too. And he was then working for UPS. He was going to school and working at UPS. And UPS gave him a test because they were going to computerize the company and expand out of Wisconsin, as they were just in Wisconsin at that time. And so they sent him to IBM school. They gave him a test, and he passed with flying colors. So they sent him to IBM school in Illinois. And he was in Decatur going to school with IBM and learning all that. And it was, for him, the fire that I felt when I got into dentistry. I could see how he was lit from within. I mean, he just loved it. It was just his bag. And he was just tooth and nail into it. And so I was like, oh, yeah, he found his place. And I got hired I had a toothache because my father took me to the dentist, and he said, oh, you have a cavity. He drilled into this tooth and about killed me. Never had anesthetic. Oh. And the next put a filling in, and in a day I was all swollen out like this. And I said, I'm not going back there. I will not go back there. I'd rather be dead than go back to that man. And my father, and I think I was like 15 then, and my father took me to a dentist that was a block away. Dr. Porter just opened his office, and he took me in there, and he he looked at his tooth and he drilled out the filling, and then he looked at my father and he said, "Who did this to her?" My father told him, and he's like, he drilled into her nerve of her tooth, and he killed the tooth, and then he had the gall to put a filling right on top of it, and this is the result. And he said he killed the tooth, and the girl's in agony, and this is terrible. So he said she needs a root canal. So they, and then he said, when did you have x-rays last? I said, I've never had x-rays. So he took x-rays, and then, of course, he found cavities. I'm like, oh, my God.
I'm not doing this again.
No, and he says, no, I'm going to use anesthetic. You won't even know. I'm like, what's that? Never had that either. And he's like, oh, so anyway, he taught down at Marquette part-time, and I think I made some appointments, and I had my third appointment. When I came in, I'm sitting in the chair, and he's working on me. And he said, Judy, how would you like to work for me? And I'm like, huh? What'd I do? You know. And he said, no, he said, I'll train you. I'll teach you what you need to know. I'm like, oh, okay. And at the time I was working at a grocery store and in the produce department, with a sort of a lecherous boss, let's put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. And we all had to kind of zip and dodge this man, especially if you were in the basement, in the lunchroom, or don't be alone with him. He just was all, not good. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, that might not be a bad move. I said, yeah, but I'll have to give some notice. So I did, and I started working for him, and he taught me. And I was his girl Friday. I did his bookkeeping. I did the cleaning. I was his assistant. And so I was like from the ground up, and I learned all this stuff. But meantime, I kept going to, I graduated high school, went on to UWM, and him and his buddies were always after me. Judy, you should go to Marquette. You should become a hygienist or a dentist. You could be a dentist too. And I'm like, And I really love teeth, but I'm like, I don't know. Then how much more years of school is this going to be? And so I continued on just to get my teaching done. But then at the very end, I was like, I really do like teeth. And I really do like the dental office. And so I just stopped at Marquette one day on my way home from UWM and went to the dental hygiene department, talked to Miss Lynn, who was in charge, and said, tell me about this dental hygiene. I'm thinking about this. And we talked. And I told her, I'm working in the dental office, blah, blah, blah. And she says, well, you want to take the test today? Well, I said, sure. So I took the test. Well, I already knew everything about teeth. I had this teacher teaching me every day that I went to work. I knew all the surface of the teeth. I knew everything. So I'm sure I aced this test. And so she said, just wait for a while. Well, I'm going to go over this test and I'll be back. She comes back and she looks at me and she said, we'll put you in the next class in September. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay. I just said it. It just blurted out. I'm like, what did you just do? It's like you just do something and then you're like, what did I say?
Oh my
and
God.
I'm like, okay, all right. And she said, I'll send you all the information. I got on the bus, went home, went in the house. My mom's there. And I said, Mom, I'm going to Marquette next fall. And my mom's like, what? And I said, yep, I'm going to be a dental hygienist. And she's like, no. She could not believe it.
No. You just went through all of this when you signed up for school again.
Yep. And him too. And he's going to school. And so we said, well, you know what? Let's we were just too busy, so we said let's just pick a weekend. We stood up at all these weddings. We didn't have time for a wedding, so we just picked a weekend and we said we're getting married. We got married. He came home from Decatur and we got married. We had a one-night honeymoon in Chicago, and then he went back to Decatur and I went to school. And so yeah, that was it. So it was just like, but it, and I'm usually, I think, more cautious at that time. Because of my dad, he was very cautious, and he taught me to be a little, probably too cautious, and was one of the bones I had to pick with them as I got older, is that they were still so protective of me because of what went on when I was a child. So they didn't want me to stretch too far. So when, you just on a whim just say, oh, okay, I'll do this. And I mean, I was young, very young. What do I know? And so, but it was a wonderful move. I mean, the good Lord was sitting on my shoulder and saying, just go for it, Judy.
You can do it, Judy.
Yeah, you can do it. Just go.
And you just keep repeating that to everybody you meet.
Then we get transferred overseas.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, well, before we go, we have to make our wills, and we have to have all our ducks in order, because we're going to a foreign country to live.
Where were you going?
France.
France, okay. So how did you like France?
I wasn't happy to be going, because I was finally child free, and I could work whatever hours and have some free time. And he says, we're going to France, and I'm like, oh no, why don't you just go? And I'm like, okay. So we went. I wasn't excited about going. I really wasn't, but it was a good learning experience. I learned French. I was pretty good at it. I can't do it now. I can read still a bit, because there you learn how to read. They don't speak any English. They don't speak any language. We were like the United Nations. We had Iranians and Dutch and Finland. One girl was from Finland. We had people from all over the countries. One was from Japan. And we used to get together with our husbands, and we'd have parties. And we'd all learn different foods. We'd trade recipes and try different things on one another. And that was kind of fun. And you find out that actually people are just people. And we all laugh because we all found out we all do brunch on Sunday morning. It didn't matter where they were from. The Iranians do brunch. The Finnish do brunch. Everybody, the Swedish, everybody, the Danish, everybody does kind of brunch stuff on Sundays. They combine breakfast and lunch, and it's a time, the family goes out for brunch. So, and we're all like, wow. Because, you think you're so unique.
Yeah.
And then when you meet other people, and you're like, oh, no, we're not that unique. They do the same thing. So,
but now we have something in common.
Yeah. And so there were 7 of us ladies who we became really, really good friends. And Jacqueline, my friend from Scotland, and I, we still are together. And I tried keeping up with some of them. They were older ladies. And eventually I lost track of them. But we were shopping one day in Paris, and the Eiffel Tower was my thing. I love the Eiffel Tower. And we went past this little shop, and in the window they had this big watch and a big round face on it with the Eiffel Tower. I have it. And I said, oh, I love that watch. I have to have that watch. And so they all went in the store with me, and I said, I'm going to buy that watch. And we're all standing there looking, and they're looking. And then they all looked at the girl, and they said, do you have more of those? And the lady said, yeah. And so all 7 of us bought that watch.
Oh, wow.
And we always said when we wore that watch, we looked at that watch, we would think of one another. Buying that watch and shopping the way we would go shopping together and to the museums and stuff. we had a lot of fun. Learned a lot about art, which I never knew till I moved there. Got really into that, and the museums and history. I always liked history, and what I found so really cool was that I could be in these places I had read about in history, and these 10th century churches and whatnot. That was one thing Dave said when they came to visit. He said, "Mom, I'm churched out now. No more churches. We don't have to go to any more churches, do we?" No. So, but yeah, a lot of history, and found out the German ladies were still carrying a lot of guilt. These are ladies who still felt guilty for the war, were still carrying guilt from the war. Couldn't believe when I sat down with Elizabeth Langer, I remember, and she said, "Oh, I'm surprised you would even talk to me." And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Well, I'm German, and you know what we did." And I'm like, "Oh, my God, that wasn't you. That was your ancestors and other people. You didn't do that. You're not to blame for what some crazy guy decided the world should be like." And they were still carrying that guilt. Way still back in that was in the 80s, late 80s, when we lived there. And they from the 40s, 40 years, they still felt guilty about that it was their fault that they let Hitler happen, and that he killed all the Jews and all the stuff that happened. And I'm like, "Oh, for goodness sakes." I'm like, "Oh, forget that. That's nonsense."
Yeah.
They just couldn't believe that we could forgive that. And I'm like, "Of course, that was somebody else in a whole different time. Had nothing to do with you. And you shouldn't worry about it.
You weren't even a thought."
You weren't a thought. It's somebody's, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we can't be held responsible for the sins of somebody else way before us. I'm like, if that's the case, then we're all in big trouble.
Right?
Because, there's a whole lot happened, and you don't know who you're all descended from.
Exactly.
And what they did way back when in Egypt and whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. But German people still have a lot of guilt about the war. Very guilty. And so we shed a lot of tears, had some very deep, meaningful conversations, and shed a lot of tears. Those ladies got a lot off their chest. Healing. Yeah. And it was, I just couldn't believe it in my own mind. I was like, oh, who would carry all that for all these years, your whole life, feel guilty about what somebody else did?
Yeah.
It was bad, but you can't take it on.
No.
But apparently, as a nation, they did take it on. After the war, they were made to feel that it was their fault. And it definitely impressed them. It really impressed them and went into them. So, yeah. So it ended up to be a very good learning experience, and I came back happy to have gone. I traveled, and I got to see so much more than I would ever have dreamed I'd be seeing. I mean, we went to Sicily, and we saw all the Roman ruins, Greek ruins, and in the Vatican and in Italy, all that. And we were at Pompeii, saw that. We drove up the road to Mount Vesuvius, which is still spewing and going, and then they would let you know if you could go any further because the gas gets so bad you can't breathe. And it's a winding road along the cone of the volcano, and you just go, because you can look straight down. It's like, oh my God. I'm like, oh, don't give way, please, just don't give way. I don't want to go down there. and crawled through lava tubes and all that kind
Oh
of
my
stuff.
goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. So, went to Hawaii a couple times, went to all the islands, different islands, and we explored, Tom and I, that together. And he's one of these people who put him in a car and he just starts driving and he just keeps going. So you just keep going, and whatever you find, oh, that looks good, we'll stop here and look at that. And so it's very unplanned, planned. You know, we're going to take a trip around the island, and whatever we see that interests us, we stop and look at. So that's what we did, and that was fun. The volcanoes there too are pretty cool. Walking on all that lava stuff, and we walked. We were able to walk where it's all going into the ocean. It's Maui, I think, the one, and it glows red at night. You can see it, but it crusts over it after it goes down, and then you can walk over it, and it's warm underneath, but you can walk over the top. And we actually made our way and walked there. And they check it out, the forest or the rangers, whatever, and they'll make sure it's safe. But there's hundreds of people trekking their way across to watch these burning thing coming out into the ocean, and the water hits it and it sizzles and steams, and it's like, yeah, but you got to be right there. You know, you don't want to miss it. You don't want to look at it from afar. You want to be right there and see it, because that's so much better. So
That's a good salesperson.
yeah. So, and it is, but it's.
You always wonder who was the first person that they sold that to. That
Yeah,
you should walk across.
Yeah, just you can go across here.
You're not gonna burn.
And it's very rumply, and they tell you, wear good sturdy shoes and whatnot, because it's rough and hobbly, and it's not something for old people to be doing. You need to have a little balance and being pretty good on your feet, but it was fun. So we've had our share of adventures for sure. We did the road to Hana and stopped to see all the beautiful waterfalls along the way, and the black beach, the different beaches in Hawaii, all the different color sands and whatnot. Pretty neat.
That would be cool.
So, and we spent time in the Virgin Islands, and I snorkeled. We never did get to try scuba-ing. We snorkeled though, and it's the only underwater national park, and so you can go and snorkel and see all the fish, the different colored fish and whatnot. And he bought me a little camera, underwater camera. Now they have those great GoPros, which are so cool. I have a friend she actually does scuba-ing, and she just posted a bunch of pictures on Facebook because she was taking pictures of fish, and the quality of the pictures, it's unbelievable. Just unbelievable. But I had my little camera, and I would get pictures of fish. Sometimes they were a little fuzzy, but I got them. And but we had a lot of fun doing that too. That's when we were, I don't know, we were probably in our 50s then, and we were adventurous still. And we were always up for an adventure, though, I guess. So we just learned to kind of go with the flow. After you moved the first time, my mother, you would have thought we were moving to Mars or something, because we were moving to Illinois. But it was like, Mom, we're an hour away. And my mom was just distraught. Oh, my God. She's moving away from home, because these were people who never moved more than a few blocks from parents and grandparents, and they lived in an area together for their whole lives. And so for children to up and leave the state was just traumatic. So after the first few moves, and then I would call and I'd say, Mom, and she said, where are you going now?
We learned too.
Yeah. So I said, a new place for you to visit.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up.
Okay.
So the last questions that I have is, or the thing I have is, do you have anything you want them to know when they watch this? Your great-grandchildren, your children?
Just keep going. Don't let anything hold you back.